Welcome to Growing Up Beverly Hills. I'm Stacy.
And I'm David. Stacy and I grew up together in Beverly Hills during the 70s and 80s.
Forget what you've seen on TV and in the movies. We're here to bring you the true stories of the people who grew up in Beverly Hills.
Our guests range from the rich and famous to those growing up south of the tracks. But they all have had their ups and downs, and they all have a story to tell.
Please join in on the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram, where we also do pop-up chats.
Give us a 5-star rating and subscribe. We need your help and support
to keep on growing up Beverly Hills.
Hey, Stacy. This was a really interesting episode.
Yes, it was. We had Mandana Yamin on. She was in our class of 84, but I learned so much about her from this talk.
Her family came from Iran via Italy before the Shah was overthrown in 79.
She was lucky to get out early, before the revolution, when the Ayatollah Khomeini took over.
Very lucky. Her family was able to establish themselves in Beverly Hills early before they were forced to leave their country like so many other families.
Beverly Hills is now 20% Iranian, so Mandana's story is a key part of the history of Beverly Hills, and it represents a time when Iran-U.S. relations were extremely tense.
Yeah, we could have easily gone to war.
It was amazing to hear how the Persian community of immigrants were able to support each other and really succeed.
Yeah, Mandana really goes over her story, but there's so many stories to tell about this, and there's a whole new generation of Iranians in Beverly Hills who are second generation and going to Beverly High or graduated. So if you have a different story, we're not done with this subject at all after this episode, please contact us and we'll have you on the show.
That would be so much fun. We'd love to keep this conversation going. It's a really important one.
We focused a lot on her early experiences growing up in Beverly Hills and being from Iran, and didn't get some important aspects of her later life.
That is true. What we really wanted to say is she is an incredible mom, and she's launched an amazing career doing interior design.
Well, there's a lot to absorb and learn in this episode, so let's get to it.
Let's do it. Mandana Yamin, welcome to Growing Up Beverly Hills. How are ya?
I'm good. Thank you, Stacy and David, for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
It's so great to see you again and have you on. You kind of represent a big subject that I've been wanting to cover for a long time, and I'm very excited about that because your family came originally from Iran.
That's true. My parents left Iran actually before the revolution, and I was born in Milan, Italy. And then when I was about almost 5 years old, we emigrated to the United States, to Los Angeles.
How did your family get to Beverly Hills?
I think what happened was, so my dad had 4 brothers. Some of them lived in Italy and some of them lived in Iran. And then one of my dad's brothers moved to Los Angeles in the late 60s. And I think it's just sort of a progression that, you know, once one family member moves, they're like, oh, we want a better life. And at that time, there was no turmoil or conflict with Persians who left and came to the United States. So there was like a very, very few of us at the time that came here. Very, very small group of people, like maybe a handful of Iranians that lived in Los Angeles that I could think of who came here at a young age.
So Iran became very close, but during the Shah, was it possible to just, easily move to the United States, or was it still a very hard process?
No, I think it wasn't a difficult process, but I don't think there was a whole lot of reason to leave Iran because from what I understand from, just talking to my parents, they had a great life. I mean, they were very happy there. My mom has so many fond memories of growing up with her brothers and her sister. People have so many fond memories of living in Iran. So I don't think there was a big need to leave.
Yeah.
But for some reason, because my dad was a merchant and he was in the rug business, and he thought that we would probably have a better life living in the States versus the thousands of people who had to leave after the revolution.
Right.
I think a lot of people don't have a good concept that the Shah was a really progressive leader and the economy was one of the fastest growing economies in the world.
It was, and a lot of people embraced the fact that he wanted to modernize the society. Women can go to school. They got rid of the chadors, the sort of the hijab. So it was really embraced by so many people, but there were a lot of people who didn't feel the same way.
Yeah.
But anyway, there were a lot of Islamic opposition.
Right.
So they were really against all of that. And I think part of the reason was that they weren't ready for, first of all, they didn't like America government, not Americans. They didn't like the American government. And so they didn't really want them to come in and westernize, their country. They weren't ready for all of the changes,
Right.
so.
Uh-huh.
And that makes sense.
And we know that kind of a disproportionate amount of people leaving came specifically to Beverly Hills. Do you have kind of a feeling for why that was?
Well, so it depends on if we're talking about like the Iranian Jews or we're talking about Persians as a whole, because there was about I would say that I think about 80,000 Jews left Iran during the revolution.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say most of them came to Los Angeles. A lot of them went to Orange County. They went to the Bay Area. They went where there was already family there. I mean,
gotcha.
I think the reason why they came to Los Angeles is because Tehran, for example, has weather that's very similar to Los Angeles and the mountains. And so they had sort of it seemed familiar to them to want to move to a place that it was similar to what they grew up with. So I think that was an important part of it,
So do you think it was that same feeling well, I've got some money and I'm Jewish, I should go to Beverly Hills because there's Jewish people with money?
I mean, we didn't necessarily move to Beverly Hills when we first came here. And I don't think a lot of people did. And listen, you have to realize that a lot of the Persians that left Iran didn't have anything. They didn't have any. My dad didn't have a lot of money when he left. A lot of people didn't have those kind of resources. What they did have was they were educated and they were merchants and they were doctors and they were scientists and they were in they were in the garment industry and they had the education and the experience to be able to say, okay, we're going to start over. And also we're just Persians. I'm not even talking about Persian Jews or non-Jews. They're just very industrious people. They are go-getters. They're hungry. They're resilient. We're not a lazy, culture by any means.
Yeah.
Well, I think it fit in with Beverly Hills because we had, the parents had the same values. We want our kids to be very well educated and spend their time studying and those kind of things.
I think after we came here, I lived in West Hollywood. And then when I was, I think in third grade, we moved to Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
I have to say, I wasn't really happy about moving to Beverly Hills because I lived up in Truesdale and I couldn't ride my bicycle anymore.
Yeah.
Right. That's what everybody says who lives up in those canyons.
I'm sorry. I mean, I know it sounds really silly, but it's true.
It's not silly. That's
it's very
big deal.
true.
I mean, it really is something that other guests have talked about.
I didn't have any friends that lived next to me or near me, except my cousin, Sascha lived up the street, but I couldn't walk to a friend's house. Everybody that lived around me was 60 years or older. Nobody had kids.
Right.
I was living in an old age community. Where's everybody? Everybody was just, they were just, when you're young, you don't think about those things. You want to be around your friends that are down the street, in the flats.
For sure.
You just want to play when you're a kid and you just want to have fun. So when you start school and you're up in Truesdale, it's hard to get down the hill and get with your friends. And that we've heard a lot that the Truesdale kids weren't always the happiest in Beverly Hills.
I know it sounds really vain, but
it's true. They couldn't get to Haagen-Dazs. You can't get to Jacopos. You can't get to your friends. You can't get around,
Baskin Robbins.
Yeah.
Couldn't go to Flippers.
You might have been closer to Flippers there.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so when you started school in third grade, you went to Hawthorne. And what was that like transitioning, meeting all these new kids? How were you accepted? How was that experience for you?
It was interesting because I actually remember the very first day of third grade, and I was petrified
Mm-hmm.
because, I still spoke English with an accent. It took me a while to fit in, so to speak, I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
was like, I think just whether I'm I come from a family of immigrants or not,
Mm-hmm.
it's just fitting in is something so important. It was to me.
At my elementary school, Ellerdale, we weren't welcoming too much to any new person, period.
Right.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you had that experience at your school.
I think that I made a huge effort. I mean, I think I'm very open and like I have a good sense of humor, and I made an effort. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
like hide in a corner. I was like, I'm going to make friends here, and
Yeah.
I felt confident that I would have friends, and I did. I had
Yeah.
lots of friends. I had all kinds of friends. So,
Did you speak Italian also?
I
Ooh.
actually forgot Italian. I was pretty angry with my parents. I'm like, why didn't you keep speaking to me in Italian? And they said, well, we came to America and we didn't even speak English. And so I think my parents struggled a lot because as a kid,
Mm.
it's pretty easy to learn a language when you're young. But when
Yeah.
you're older, English is completely different than Farsi and
Mm-hmm.
Italian. So I don't think my parents had the bandwidth to continue to speak Italian with us. Sadly, I don't speak Italian.
Do you speak Farsi too as
Yeah, of
well?
course. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think the majority of the people that I grew up with in my generation all speak Farsi.
Great.
Sadly, though, like the next generation, they just don't speak Farsi to their kids. And it's really sad because there's going to be a whole new generation of Iranians. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Iranians marry outside of, their culture
Mm-hmm.
and it happens, but they just don't speak Farsi to their kids. And so we're going to lose a lot of that, unfortunately.
It does get to be a big loss, I think, when people immigrate and they lose parts of their culture and their tradition and their lifestyle. I want to ask, did your family keep the traditions alive in your home? Did you experience where they were from and felt part of your homeland in your own home growing up?
After the revolution, the majority of my family came to Los Angeles. I mean, we were lucky that we were able
Yeah,
to, they were able to leave.
for sure.
So I think being Jewish, obviously we celebrated all the holidays. My mom cooked Persian food only. I mean, my mom didn't make casserole or
Right. No tuna casserole.
no devil's egg, none of that. No Wonder Bread in my house. It was like pita bread and
Yeah.
it was, lavash. So, I mean, and that makes me laugh because I remember like when I was going to school and I would bring my lunch, people were like, what the hell are you eating?
What do you got in there?
I had like avocado toast before it was even a trend to eat avocado
sure.
toast. Part of me was like, this is really good, guys. You don't understand. And then part of me was like, Mom, can you just make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and then cut off the ends and triangle it?
Right.
So, yeah, as far as like culturally, definitely 100%, it was very present growing up. I mean,
Wonderful.
holidays, family and food is so big in our culture. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like we're like the Middle Eastern Italians, you know what I mean?
For sure.
Like, family get-togethers were really important. My parents lost so much that they left the country that they loved. I don't think they realized that they weren't ever going back. Like that was it.
Right.
And that's got to be
because they left so early. They thought they could go back and forth freely, and it would always be some Shah in power. So
when you think about other cultures, like the immigrants that came from China or Japan or Russia, they can go back.
Yeah.
Right? They, I mean, if they want to.
Yeah.
And sadly, when I talk to other family members about it, because I would love to go back. Like
Sure.
I've only been there once, and I mean, I want to go back. It's part of who I am. It's a huge part of who I am. So,
well, legally, you can't travel there at all.
I mean, you can. I have an American passport, which is not really. They don't want Americans there. My last name is Arabic, so they don't know I'm Jewish. It's. I mean, I keep saying now is not a good time. Now is always never a good time. So it just seems that I would love to go back, but I would have to probably go back with a different passport.
For sure.
And if I have Israel on my passport, then I can't go.
You cannot go.
No.
Wow.
So Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I could be wrong, but that's like the last time I checked, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Like in the earlier years when you were young, was it hard for your mom, or did they just meet friends and kind of assimilate well?
So I think for my mom, it was difficult because she was a stay-at-home mom, and the language barrier was very difficult for her. I mean, to this day, she still has trouble speaking English.
Yeah.
But she was happy because her brothers were here and her sister. And my mom was super busy. Like, she made all our clothes. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but she did. My mom was a fantastic seamstress, and she cooked all our meals, and she took us to like my brother's soccer practice and my ballet classes. And so she was super busy. I mean, I think it was bittersweet, At that time, I don't think my grandparents were here, but I think once everybody was here,
it got better.
Of course, it got better. I mean, then you just create your own community,
Sure.
My mom did not have any American friends. She wasn't friends with any of my friends' moms. Like,
right. She didn't make friends with your friend's mom. And
or at a drop off at a birthday party. No,
Right.
I mean, my mom was really shy.
Too difficult with the language barrier.
She just was also very shy, very private. She just didn't really get she didn't get the American culture. She just found it so foreign to her,
Yeah.
I mean, no offense, but Persians are very warm and affectionate and like come to our house and what do you want to eat and drink? And it wasn't reciprocated the same way, if that makes sense.
Totally understand. Yeah.
Your family probably didn't have this feeling like a lot of immigrants, like I'm going to the United States for freedom and more rights and things like that, and my religious freedom. It wasn't a situation like that for your family.
Personally, not for us. I guess we were the lucky ones that we didn't have to leave. But I have to say we were lucky. I think Persians as a whole were very lucky that they were able to leave. I mean, they didn't want to leave, but they got to leave. And, they're all spread out all over the world. I mean, in Europe and, in the United States. And I mean, there's Persians everywhere.
Yep.
I mean, you seriously, like, I was in Sao Paulo in a flower shop and I heard some woman speaking Farsi to her kids. And I said, oh my God, there's Persians in Sao Paulo. So I'm blown away when I hear, people speaking Farsi in another country that I just wouldn't expect them to be living there. It's to me, it's surreal.
Oh yeah.
To give people some background, the Shah, who we all say is just the Shah, he's like a king, right?
Yeah, he was the king. His father was also the king. And I mean, it becomes very political if you say sadly or not sadly, but he was overthrown and it was a big deal.
That happened like February of 1979. He was overthrown.
He was overthrown the end of January of 1979. And then the hostage crisis happened in November of 1979.
Right.
And I think that's when all of this Persian sentiment became really painful to a lot of people who were already living here and people who were planning to come here. So, that happened and then it got worse. I mean, me being here in the beginning was like, oh, she's a girl with a big nose and an accent. Then it became, oh, she's Persian or she's Iranian, then it had a whole different sentiment to be Persian and Iranian. And I think
was that kind of the first time that your friends or anybody were kind of conscious that you were Persian and that this?
I think before it wasn't a big deal because, they're like, oh, well, Persian cat and Persian, Persian food and, Persian rug. It was, it was just very baseless in that respect. And then there was so much anti-American sentiment after the hostage crisis that I think a lot of the reasons why people changed their names to sound more westernized was because of that. They didn't want to be Sharon. They wanted to be Sean. They didn't want to be Fasha. They wanted to be Fred. And then even myself, I, in fourth grade, decided I didn't want to be Mandana. I wanted to be Donna. And then, so I changed my name for a year.
I didn't know that.
And then I realized, okay, I don't look like a Donna. I don't sound like a Donna. I'm not Donna.
No,
You know,
I
like
love
I'm
your
not,
name.
I don't, I'm like, okay, I'm going back to my name. I'm like, I had a year of being, I thought I could be a cool American. And
So were you feeling it?
Well, yeah, did you feel it?
I mean, the hostage crisis was such a dominant thing that
I
year
mean, it
that it
was
was
on the
on the
news every
news
day. Yeah,
every
every
single
day,
day, and it
every day.
lasted forever.
It lasted for
Well over a
444 days.
That's
you know?
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was, a lot of anti-Iranian sentiment, to say the least. It was just prevalent.
And then at the same year, a lot of people came to America
A lot of people came to
that
America.
same year. So, because I came to Beverly Hills that year, and I remember going to Beverly Vista, and I was new, and then all these new kids started coming into school, and it was like, what? So there was a lot happening.
Well, around 80,000 Jews
Unbelievable.
left. And I mean, if you think about it now, there's over 500,000 Iranians living in United States.
That's incredible.
I think Beverly Hills is 20% Iranian.
Yeah, 20%. I mean, at the time, I think it's 20% like now, but I don't think it was 20% when we went to high school.
No,
No.
because it grew over time. I mean,
Yeah.
It became multi-generational because
Yeah.
started with you. You were one of the earliest, and then
I should be mayor.
You are mayor.
Yeah.
You're our honorary growing up Beverly Hills mayor.
I'm mayor. Give me my damn key.
We're going to give you a key. Don't worry.
It might have been there probably weren't many families except your family that
It
were
was the
here at that early.
Shokrians. Do you know the Shokrians?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
They were one of the first families that came here. There were I'm sure there were a handful.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was very torn because I came before the revolution, and I was trying to assimilate and become Americanized.
Yeah.
And then the Persians came, and I was like, I don't dress like you. I don't really, I don't have that accent anymore. And
right.
So I had a difficult time embracing them in a way.
You had your established friends.
I had my established friends.
You were pretty all-American by that time, I imagine.
I mean, I didn't look all-American.
No, but you were doing...
Well, I was more Americanized. I mean, I didn't go home and pretend like I was somebody. I was still who I was. I couldn't hide who I was, nor did I want to, but I did have there was a time that I felt, do I want to embrace people that are just like me, but are not like me? Mm-hmm. And I struggled with it for a while. I wasn't so conscious of it at the time, but as I got older, and then when I remember in high school, I embraced the Persians that went to Beverly. I had my Persian friends. I had my core, a group of Persians that I loved, and we would leave campus and go to McDonald's every day, and we'd laugh, and we spoke the same language, and sometimes you didn't want someone to hear what you had to say, and we had a joke, and so I was able to have that, right?
Yeah.
But they were still very different than all my other American friends, and the Persians just really stuck with the Persians. I mean, they didn't really venture off that much in high school, from what I can remember.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think, because you were the only one that kind of went to different groups.
Yeah, because I was really involved in drama, so I had
you were friends with everybody. You went to every group.
Yeah, I went to every group. I think
you did.
I needed that acceptance at the time.
Yeah.
But you had also made some of your strongest bonds is what you make in elementary school with those friends. So you have these friends established.
I'm always happy to see somebody I run into from elementary school. It's as if you pick up where you left off. There's always a hug. You're always happy to see somebody. I mean, not everybody, but for the most part, yes. Mm-hmm. I still keep in touch with a lot of the people that I went to high school with, but I'm a different person now than I was then too. I mean, we all are, obviously.
Yes.
Stay 12 and 15 forever, but I mean, we're all different, but I embrace more of who I am, where I come from, my ancestry. I mean, we're a country of over 3,000 years. It's like, how could I not embrace all that wonderfulness? I mean, when I think about it, it's the people are not the government, and it was really hard to explain that to people that were mean to me and called me names, and me watching other students be mean to other Persians. I always would stand up for them. I'm like, I'm very outspoken, and, I don't keep my mouth shut very often, but I've always felt the need to be able to support them and not let people like belittle them. And it happened. Yeah. It happens. It still happens. I mean, it happened.
So we were like 12 and 13 during the revolution, and that's really when people were coming, more people. And so were you seeing this name calling and everything happening like that?
I think it happened more like right after that. Like, obviously, like it took a minute, right? I mean, people were coming in, and then, the media didn't help.
No.
Right.
And the hostage crisis.
And the Ayatollah, and the way people were treated and the way women were treated. And it was heartbreaking to see that women were able to go to college, have an education, not have to wear the chador, and be liberated, and then having to go back to this sort of like fundamental lifestyle, which is not what the majority of Iranians wanted.
So the Ayatollah Khomeini takes over. He rolls back all of these freedoms, and
he basically just said nothing Western. He was just so anti-American. And I mean, it also has to do with oil. I mean, it's very complicated when it comes down to it.
Yeah. The Iran-Iraq war immediately starts too.
Yep. The Iran-Iraq war starts. So there's all that. And then there was a time I remember I was in the film industry for a while, and I was working in North Carolina, and it was during Desert Storm. And my boyfriend at the time said, "You cannot tell people that you are Persian." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because a lot of the people that were working on set, their family members were in the military and they were off. And if they heard Persian," I said, "But," they said, "it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't, you have to say you're Italian." So I had to tell everybody I was Italian, because every day I would hear effing Iranian and effing and Iraqi. We were all like kind of all put together in a group. Like,
yes, of course.
Like, I'm not Iraqi. But I think the sad part is that the ignorance is really conveyed when they think that Arabs and Persians and Iraqis and Syrians were all the same. I mean, we share a lot of similar cultural attributes, but we're very different too. So I can't educate someone who's so ignorant that way, Right. So I try to not engage when I realize, even today, when people say stuff like camel jockey and and san n word.
Yeah.
I refuse to engage, because I just find myself too intelligent for that. You would hear it a lot.
Were you hearing it from people in school with you, 7th and 8th graders?
Or 9th? She's more in high school. It really
more
kind of
high
after
school.
We got high school once we got rolling.
I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but because I did have a lot of Persian friends, they definitely got scrutinized for being different and looking different and having an accent and keeping to themselves. And they were just minding their own business for the most part. I didn't feel like the Persians in high school were out to get anyone and be like, they weren't bullies or they weren't aggressive.
In elementary school, we were very conscious. Here's a new person, and they came from Iran. It was weird. Like, I think it was 7th or 8th grade, and we had a lot of new people come from different countries too. And I can remember my own experience at Elrodale. There were people who came from Iran, but we also had my friend Patrick, who came from Holland. And we were aware of all these foreigners because we're aware of any new people. It's just not that big of a school or anything like that. We would play after school, like, for instance, and we'd say, let's play the Americans against the foreigners. And I don't think we were doing it in a racist way, but maybe we were.
But I mean, you're sort of the exception of the rule, though. Like, I mean, I think...
I don't know if I was the exception. That's what I'm trying to remember.
I also think that Beverly High was huge. What did we have? Like 3,000 kids in our student body? What was it? Like
4,000, I think, or something.
600 in our class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
So
big.
there's
2,400 or whatever.
I also think that everybody was pretty self-absorbed at that time too. Everybody was just sort of, people are just thinking about, what they're wearing and does he like me? And
Yeah.
How's it, right? Do I have a crush on him?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like nobody,
who's going to sit with me at lunch?
You might have a clique based on we speak the same language, or we're in drama, or we play football.
Now, if you were to, let's just put aside Beverly Hills and imagine Persians. And I don't want to stereotype, but like in the Midwest or somewhere where there's no other ethnicities, really. Think about it. Like, at least LA is a melting pot, right?
Right.
I had all friends of all kinds from all different nationalities, right? So
for sure.
Yeah.
I think the Persians that lived outside of like LA, for example, that were just few of them. Like I remember my uncle moved to Kansas City, Missouri with his brother to go to college. It was like unheard of. Persians, like, who are you? People just stared at them because they looked so different. And so, they were really handsome too. So they were dark with curly hair. They had an afro, you know what I mean? Like, they really stood out. So I think Beverly, on one hand, I think I noticed more like sort of more prejudice of people's mentality outside of school, but I did also sense it in school too. And it was isolated incidences that, you don't always, Persians weren't going to go to the principal and said, so-and-so called me a name. They just would just let it roll off their shoulder and be like, whatever, we don't care.
Oh, it must have been so hard. Like, it's so upsetting to me as we talk about it, because it must be so hard. First, you come to a new country and, a lot of the, like you said, the families during in the late 70s they fled, and then they come to their new home and then just get bullied and don't make it easy. And I remember feeling so much empathy for some of the kids. It must have been very difficult.
It's completely night and day. The cultures couldn't be more different. Like they're polar opposite of each other if you think about it, in every way, with food and mannerisms and language and history and music and poetry and just like, on and on, and I think a lot of Persians didn't want to assimilate. They didn't want to be Americanized.
Right.
There's nothing against that. They wanted to keep what little that they had left of what was like their whole lives being ripped apart to come to a country that I'm not sure how embracing it was, but as embracing as it could be, to hold on to who they were. And a lot of people are still that way, like I know so many Persians who don't speak English. Like they still, like my grandmother still struggled with English when she came here, and she'd been living here for like over 20 years, So
for anybody who doesn't live in LA, there's big pockets of Persian communities, and you could certainly do everything in the world just speaking Persian.
Yes.
Farsi.
Just speaking Farsi, sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, by the way, we talk about Persian, and we don't. I know that people.
Do you want to know the difference?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Persian versus Iranian.
It's always been Persian, and then like the Shah's father decided to anglicize the name, if that's a word. I'm making it up otherwise.
It's a good word.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure it's not the
right
right
word. I think it is.
And so it came from the German word Aryan, so they made it Iran. But as far as Persian and Iranian, I think that Persian, just sounds more exotic, and Iranian had just sort of a negative connotation. There was just too much stigma that was attached to Iran. Persian just sounds just
beautiful.
Yeah, it just sounds beautiful. And so I think, I go back and forth saying it. I don't do it consciously, but when people say, where's your family from? I say Iran. What food do I eat? Persian, so it really, I don't differentiate so much as like most people do, but I do think Persian sounds better and it has less of a negative attachment to the word. So yeah.
Totally.
But I do want to say one thing, because
please,
you wonder why the Persians came to LA. They really had such a strong work ethic. You know what I mean? Like my dad opened up a rug store in the 70s on Melrose Avenue.
He did?
So my dad was a rug merchant, and he imported, exported. Him and his brothers, yeah, they always did that.
So even back in Iran, they did that.
Yeah, they did that. And then they did it in Italy. And then he moved to LA, and then he opened up a little rug shop. I think I still have his business card somewhere.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And he worked alone. And I would go after school and sit on the rugs, and it stunk of mothballs. But I just have mad respect for my dad in so many ways, because he's always been a hard worker. And I think that's sort of a similar thread to so many other immigrants that come to this country, where they have that same work ethic, and they want to prosper, and they want to have the American dream.
Yeah.
So that was so important to my parents, that we got to go to college, which is something that my parents never did. And just have a lot of the things that they didn't get to have over there.
Speaking of your dad's business, what did he do after the revolution? Because if he's exporting and importing rugs, he can't get them from Iran any longer.
Well, he got rugs from Russia, Turkey, Pakistan, China.
Everywhere but Iran.
No, he did have Persian rugs. For some reason, he was able to get them. I'm really not sure exactly how, but he did have... I have a bunch of my dad's rugs in my house. So he was able to get them. I honestly would have to ask him that question, because I'm not really sure. But I think the
United States boycotted everything from
Iran.
I
think, remember that my dad came here in the late, early 70s.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of the rugs went through Milan and Milan, LA. So it went through my uncles who were living there at the time. And then he brought them here.
That makes sense.
I don't think it went directly from Iran to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I lost my pistachios.
What do you mean?
I loved Iranian pistachios, and after
you can get them, you go to the Persian market.
Now you can get them very easily. But back when I was a kid, my brother and we ate.
I didn't know you liked.
We loved.
You loved them, and then you couldn't get them.
You
and
couldn't
you were
get
super
them.
bummed.
Yeah. I go all the time to the Persian market now to get Iranian pistachios.
I know
it's still my favorite.
Ooh, I'm going to have to move on to to Persian pistachios. I would like that.
Oh, they're so much better. It's like a whole different thing.
So good.
Just Persian food.
Like the California pistachio is like a ridiculous replacement for a Persian one.
I go to the Persian market. I live in Santa Monica. I go to the Persian market and I buy it like in bulk.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I don't buy it in a bag. It comes like, I don't know, he sticks his hand in there and I'm like, all right, it's fine. I don't care. I'll take it.
I love it.
No glove. No
glove. That's so old school.
Well, we eat with our hands anyway.
For sure.
Some foods we do anyway. So
now I heard that you had a lot of fun at your house, at your mom, and had a lot of gambling and a lot of fun evenings growing up.
Gambling
what was that about?
Is a very big
I heard
part.
Gambling was big.
So my mom I can't say her age, but she's in her early 80s and she still plays cards with her friends twice a week. And listen, they're playing for money. It's no joke. They're not just playing for fun. They're playing for money. My dad is almost 90 and he goes to the Hollywood Park Casino every night till 2 a.m.
Come on.
Wow.
And what do? They play cards?
My dad plays cards. My mom plays cards. My dad is an avid backgammon player. He used to play tournaments in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
We get comped there all the time.
Cool.
I mean,
Nice.
this is growing up. We like where everybody else would go to like Hawaii and we go to Vegas for the holidays.
Dad's in a tournament.
I'm like, I'm 13. What am I going to do in Vegas? You know,
right? Especially then.
So my parents' idea of taking the kids on a road trip in the station wagon was always someplace where there was gambling involved.
I love that.
Card playing, backgammon is such a big part of our culture. I remember in high school, Roxanne Shalomi was one of my best friends. We would get together on a Saturday. I don't even think it was weird. We would sit and play cards all day long. We get like 4 people together while other people were like doing whatever, skateboarding, ice skating, cheerleading.
You're having a card game.
Yeah, I didn't make the cheerleading team. I didn't have that cheerleading vibe. But anyway, I was playing cards. I loved it. Are you kidding? I loved going to Vegas as a kid.
That's great.
As I got older because I could gamble. But I mean, I think gambling is tricky.
Yeah, it
because
is.
even though it's cultural that we love to, play cards, but I think it's so social. It's like the
Yes.
most social thing you can do. It's so intimate. You're sitting around a table with a bunch of your favorite people, eating,
Yeah.
drinking, smoking cigarettes, and gambling till 3, 4 in the morning.
Sounds good to me.
I don't know a lot of cultures that do that.
Me neither. I think that sounds really fun, and it brought probably a lot of fun and life to your guys' house and communities.
It's
I mean,
still happening. All my Persian friends' moms have a group of friends that they play cards with. It's crazy.
What's the game they play?
They play like rummy. They play like different versions of rummy si satai, the rummy 300. I don't know. They play all kinds of rummies.
I love it.
Every rummy.
Every rummy there is, they play.
Yeah,
that's great.
Remy.
Remy Martin too.
Yeah, my mom is a Scotch drinker.
I think that's awesome.
It's funny.
One of the craziest things I kind of remember during this whole early experience was that there were also protests happening in Beverly Hills, and they were big. I tried to find some articles about it. I found one from like January 2nd, 1979, where they said hundreds of Iranian students marched at the home of the sister of the Shah. And that was because her mother was going to come visit. And they said they were throwing rocks and bottles and small fires were started. And 32 people were injured and the police used tear gas. I remember some days getting walked home from elementary school and there was craziness happening in the streets. Do you remember that?
I mean, I don't remember that particular incident, but I do remember a lot of things. I think my parents tried to sort of protect us from all of that because I think they realized that they didn't want us to be a target in any way. If something was going on, they would talk about it, but they wouldn't really talk about it in front of their children, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was just exposed to it because it was just happening around us. And it was kind of like my first feeling of turmoil.
Okay, but I was like in Truesdale, right? So like,
you were far away.
I was so removed. I could have been
in another world.
I could have been in Thousand Oaks. Like I was
sure.
I was in a bubble. Listen, I have no idea I don't know. This must have been South Beverly Hills because it was. No, I'm just kidding.
It was near Santa Monica
I guess
Boulevard.
it was.
I
think it was probably like along Wilshire Boulevard or something like that. And I don't know if they were anti-Shah or... I mean, some people didn't like the Shah
a lot of people didn't like the Shah.
Yeah.
A lot of people liked the Shah. A lot of people didn't like the Shah. I mean, when I asked my parents, they give me a very vague answer on how they feel, because it would be very interesting to talk to more Persians, parents who had to leave to see. It'd be interesting sort of documentary to make about how they really feel having to leave. And there's no question in my mind that nobody wants the Ayatollah or his regime or all of his crazy fanatical people running the country over there with their views. But what they had with the Shah really divided the country in so many ways because it really affected so many people in so many different ways. So I think that they're very conflicted about what happened and how the Americans dealt with the Shah. And so it gets very problematic about who's pro-Shah and who's, nobody's pro-Khomeini or what's going on in the country right now. I mean, but still to this day, all the Americans still like, the Iranians, like they can't get their country together. It's still a sore subject. It's still really painful for a lot of these Persians who never get to go back. I mean, I think that's really the key, that they can't go back to their country. They can't, they can't go back to the home that they had. Everything was taken away from them, so very few people were able to smuggle money out. A lot of people lost everything that they had and they came here.
I was going to ask about that too. So people couldn't just leave, like if you have, I'm just going to say $100,000 in your bank account, you just can't take your money and go.
No,
I think that at the time.
No, I don't think they were able to do that.
Yeah.
Probably they were smart. Like they just took the money or had money, or they were able to get the money, or they knew somebody at the banks, or they just had some kind of like contact or a little connection with somebody that they were able to take the money. And then like, it depends on which way they went. A lot of them went through
Sure.
Europe, and everybody went in a different direction. You know what I
Sure.
mean? So I think they were able to have access to people who were able to send them money. I mean, if you're going to smuggle money, you're going to be able to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
people do it all the time. So like they were able to somehow bring the money into the country. But when people say, oh, the Persians were, you know, they were so successful, I think a lot of it was that we supported each other 100%.
Gotcha.
People like your brother worked with you and your cousin, you know, you all worked together. Everybody, you needed money here. You know, my dad always would lend somebody money that just came from Iran, and
Right.
we had each other's backs.
Exactly. I mean, so you all helped each other.
Everybody helped each other.
Grow your community and get comfortable here in America and start a life.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I find it very strange how easy we were able to, like a lot of these, not myself, but a lot of the Persians at the time were able to just come to America. I mean, if this were to happen now, we wouldn't be able to leave.
No.
Right. So I find it very ironic that so many Persians were pro-Trump. Like, what?
What? We can't go there.
I lost my mind.
I don't get, that's a mind
I mean, you can
loss.
be Republican, but to be pro-Trump, I had a hard time with that.
The Ayatollah must not have clamped everything down. I guess they had a window.
If you think about it, that the majority of the people living in Iran right now are like 25 to 40, right?
Yeah.
They are not supporters of the regime right now in their country, right? But they are so silenced at this point, right? They can't just be like, you know what, I want to just kind of leave and go live somewhere else. They can't do that. So we're so lucky that we were able to leave when we did.
Yep.
Do you have any family still there?
Not really. No. I mean, there are Iranian Jews that still live in Iran. Maybe there's probably about 5,000 to 6,000, I would say, that are there currently that maybe come and go. My uncle at one point was living there. He loved it. He said it was great.
Yeah.
And anyone I know who's traveled there says it's incredible. It's beautiful. The people are warm. They love Americans. They don't love they don't love the government, but we don't love their governments. They're just embracing warm people that sort of got the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. You know, my mom or dad ever say, God, we want to go back to Iran. I think that chapter is closed for them, you know, and it's kind of sad because I wonder how many other people want to go home and like just
can't
just go back to the street they grew up, eat at their favorite restaurant and go to the park that they used to go to as kids.
Yeah.
Is something that makes me kind of sad in a way. It's being nostalgic about something that they can't have anymore is really, it's kind of bittersweet in a way because they have so many other things here, but it's not the same.
Yeah. I think that's really sad because you do want to be able to come and go, like you said, go back to your childhood home or reconnect with your memories and who you are and where you come from. And it's so hard for when you can't go back.
And I also think that in a way, it's interesting because if they could, they might be really sad about it because they would see like it's changed so much that maybe that if they can hold on to the memories that they had, which was innocent and
pure and loving and happy
and all of those things, that they wouldn't have to be reminded of the harsh realities of what's going on in their country now. And maybe it's just better for them to just have those memories versus the ones that will be a hard pill to digest, so to speak.
Yeah. I remember talking to some people who were like teenagers in Tehran before they came here. Their memories sound like my memories. They were partying and going to discos and things like that. You know, I imagine that doesn't exist.
No.
Today.
Well, it does. It's just, it happens in people's homes and they party like crazy and they're drinking but it's not at a nightclub. It's
underground.
It's underground. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I talked to a few people who come and go, you know, they go back to Iran, you know, to go visit family, and the people are struggling. There's like unemployment is high and they don't have a lot of the medical resources that they need. And then you wonder, like, who wants to help Persians, you know?
Right.
Right.
And then the majority of the Persians that are here are like, well, we have our own problems here. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting because I think like Iranian Jews consider themselves more Jewish than Iranian, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So they relate more to being Jewish than they do Iranian, versus I believe that Iranian Muslims consider themselves more Iranian than Muslim. It's a very interesting, and I can't really explain it in great detail, but I feel that because so many of the Persian Jews have left Iran, that they don't look back as much as you would think they would, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Yes.
Tell us about your life today.
Yeah, how was your life after high school, or what happened? Who did you become?
I'm still becoming who I'm becoming, right? I'm still becoming who
I
am.
Me too.
Constant
work in progress.
Well, today I live in Santa Monica. I'm a beach person.
Love that.
Cancer, you know, I have to be close to the ocean.
We're going to say it. We're birthday twins.
Yes, Stacy and I
always text each other for the last number of years.
Stacy and I share the same birthday. I think we share many things. I think we share a lot of things.
We do. For sure. So after school, where did you go to college?
I went to NYU.
Ooh, film?
I studied film.
David, too.
You went to NYU?
Well, I went to Hampshire College and then I went to USC Film School, but I actually did the summer film program one summer at NYU. That was great.
Tish?
Yeah.
That's fun.
Sorry I didn't see you.
You had to make like 5 mini films over the summer, and it was really a great experience.
I went to school with one of the Lazar brothers. He was at my school.
Oh, yeah. And you went to elementary school with him, too.
NYU was great. My parents did not want me to go away to college. They wanted me to get married and settle down and have 20 kids.
Yeah.
I didn't do any of that. I was a rebel. I wasn't what they wanted as a daughter. I didn't do anything that they really wanted me to do. I got into the school of my dreams.
Amazing.
People used to say to me, "Are you a New Yorker?" I said, "No, you sound like a New Yorker." I'm like, "Oh, maybe I should go to school in New York." And so when I got in, I was so excited because I thought, "Oh, I'm going to fit in perfectly in New York," which I did. And my dad was really against me going away to school. He goes, "Why can't you go to UCLA? Why you don't go to USC?" And I'm like, my dad sounds Russian, but he's not. And that was a really bad Persian accent. And so I wanted to get out of here. I was like, get me the F out of here.
Yeah. Did you love living in New York?
I love living in New York. So when I went away to college, my dad's so funny. My dad flew out with me. Like, you know how you go to college and your parents like fix up your room. Well, there was no dorm. We were living in a hotel because the dorm wasn't ready yet. And I was sharing the hotel room with the other roommates and my dad. My dad got up in the morning. And made breakfast. Who wants omelet? Who wants omelet? Make you omelet. And these girls were like, who is this crazy man with his loud voice?
That's great.
It was unheard of for like, now it's like these girls are doing whatever they want. For me at the time, I just wanted to go away to college and I got in and I thought, well, this is it. I really had to beg my parents to let me go.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that taste of freedom was incredible because I did grow up with very traditional parents who weren't into the sleepovers and none of that. Like there wasn't a curfew and be home at a certain time and all that stuff. So
was it a gender issue as well? Was like if you were a boy, would have been completely different?
Yeah, I was expected to be a virgin when I got married.
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. And your brothers can do no wrong.
No. The men have carte blanche. The women, I mean, you were expected to marry at a young age, preferably Persian. Mm-hmm. If you're Jewish, absolutely, they want you to marry somebody Jewish. Mm-hmm. I wanted my freedom. I didn't want to go from my parents' house to my husband's house in any way. Yeah. So
you took a different path.
And I had to lie about it too in so many ways, about many things in life. But in the long run, I think a lot of these Persian girls couldn't do what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them were okay with it. I mean, a lot of them were just perfectly fine with
becoming a wife. And
yeah, they
following that tradition.
I remember wanting in high school, wanting to go downtown to, I don't know, I can't remember why. And my friends wouldn't leave. Persians, they wouldn't leave Beverly Hills. They would not.
No.
They were like, no, it's not safe. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
No, come on, guys, let's go. No, it's not safe. So
yeah.
In that respect, it's also because there's people, the Persians were so scared of like anything happening to the children that they just wanted to keep them close because, it's a foreign country to them.
Yeah.
So it was unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come home after college or did you come back to LA?
I grudgingly came back to LA. I did not want to come back to LA, but my parents were like, it's time for you to come home. I'm like, And then I came back. I worked in the movie industry for like 10 years and I did everything. I worked as an electrician, grip. I worked in doing titles for films. I worked in wardrobe. I did set design. I worked at ICM. I got fired after a few days. I mean, it was just a night. And then one day a friend of mine was like, I'm going to Brazil to do some work. And I was in between jobs. I was working in the film industry and I wasn't working at the time. I was living in Venice. I had like this rent control apartment. It was a total dump. And he's like, do you want to go? I've got a free ticket. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. Okay, let's go.
Why not?
And I went and I didn't leave. I lived there for a year.
You did?
I did.
How old were you? How amazing is that?
I was like, I think I was in my late 20s.
That's awesome.
And I called my mom. I said, pack my clothes. I'm not coming back. And I moved to Brazil. I lived in Sao Paulo and I taught English. Incredible. And then I moved to this little beach town called Búzios, which is north of Rio. And I had an apartment on the beach and I wore a bikini. And those days I was able to wear a bikini. And I had a surfer boyfriend who didn't speak a word of English.
Oh, perfect.
I had the best. It was like the best.
That's the best year of your whole life. I love it.
He was 10 years younger than me. I was like pre-cougar, Pre-cougar.
Well, you were ahead of the times with the avocado toast and the cougar.
Exactly. Like people listen up. And I thought like, if I don't do this now in my life, when will I do this? Because I think like everything happens for a reason and you're supposed to just sort of like go with it. So I came back after, I was like, okay, I love Brazil, but I mean, we're talking bare essentials I didn't get to have in my life at that time.
Gotcha.
So like washing clothes by hands, I didn't have a car. There was no cell phones. I had to make a phone call at a payphone. This is before cell phones.
Sure.
I moved back and I started my own business. It's very ironic. I wore these Havaianas that everybody was wearing in Brazil. And this is back in 1999. And I wore a pair and my brother's girlfriend's like, oh, these are so cute. You should show them to the head buyer at Ron Herman, which is Fred Siegel.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. So I go, I said, I'm thinking about bringing these in. And he looked at me and he's like, okay, I'll take 300 pairs.
Oh my God. How amazing is that?
So I was like, oh shit, I got to go back to Brazil and fill up my suitcase. Do you know what they are, David?
No, I was going to say I have no idea what a Havaiana is.
They're flip-flops, just flip-flops.
Flip-flops.
I might have a pair right near me.
That won't help our listeners.
Well, they're called Havaiana flip-flops and everybody has a pair of them. And whether you are a worker doing construction in Brazil or you're like, a very wealthy person, everybody has a pair. They're like $3, right?
Is it a look I'd recognize? Are they?
Oh, everybody. So now everybody in the world has these.
Yeah.
Oh, they all have them?
Yeah, except for you, David. I'll send you a pair.
Except you. We're going to get you a pair, David.
I don't like the way it feels against my big toe, those flip-flops.
Oh, David, you're going to get used to it.
No, they're so comfortable. I still wear them.
Everyone loves them. I probably have 50 pairs.
Yeah, so I did that for a while, and then I just got into design, and that was sort of my segue into like I started importing those, and then I started jewelry. I needed an excuse to travel. So I thought like whatever I can do for work that involves getting on a plane and getting the hell out of LA for a while, that's what I wanted to do. And so I did that for a while, and then I came back and I got into real estate for a while with my dad while my brother was in college. And I'm not an office person. I just can't sit in front of a computer all day. So when he graduated, he took over the family business, and I went off to doing design work. And so now I'm like an interior stylist. I do styling for people's homes and stuff like that. Yeah, I have my own business.
How great is that?
Perfect.
I love it.
Look at you. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it too. I love that you did that you found your way and don't have a traditional way and still do interiors and all these fun things. I love that you made it work.
I think maybe your entrepreneurial spirit comes from having to rebel against your parents because you were independent.
I learned so much business from my dad. My dad he should write a book about how to be an entrepreneur and how to talk to people or how not to talk to people, because he had nothing. I mean, literally came from nothing. And, he really just prospered in so many ways. And like he never wanted me to work, because I remember in high school, I wanted to work at Century City. I worked at Bullock's in the Century City Mall. He was so upset at me. He's like, I work so hard so you don't have to. And I said, Dad, I really love to work. I want to make my own money, just like you did. But he didn't see it that way. He looked at like, no daughter of mine should work. She needs to. And I was like, but Dad, it's okay. Like, it's okay to work. You look how hard,
Yeah.
But I think it was also just cultural, that he didn't want his daughter to work because he looked at it like it's a man's job, not a woman's job to work. So there you go.
There you go. Wow.
I like to ask this one question at the end of our episodes is, what's a very over-the-top experience you had just by
growing up in Beverly Hills?
Something crazy you got to do that is just so Beverly Hills.
I don't know if this is so crazy, but think about how many celebrity kids went to our school, right?
Yeah.
And, I think when you're at that age, it didn't really faze me. Like Leslie Hackman was one of my closest friends, and I used to go to her house all the time. I never felt like, oh my God, her dad's a famous actor, is starstruck.
Father Gene Hackman, one of the greatest actors of all time.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I tell people that I went to Beverly High, they think it's 90210.
Totally.
Right.
So I sometimes hesitate to say where I went to high school, but I guess the craziest thing is, just there were so many diverse people that went to our school that honestly, like everybody that I was friends with that I knew had such an interesting, diverse background. Like everybody was so interesting to me. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't very vanilla. Like we had so many different people, and it was so, I find like a lot of high schools didn't have that like we did. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. Yeah. That's why we're doing a whole show on it. And all the people and the interesting people that we've met and how we all grew up in Beverly Hills and how we've all come together and people became super famous and this and that or not.
But not everybody at Beverly was wealthy too,
No, not at all. But we all have that connection. And there's something about all of us being from our hometown of Beverly Hills that brings us together, which is a shared experience.
A shared experience. And I really felt that there was a community there.
There was.
We all got together. I didn't really witness a lot of discrimination to the extent that I was going to the principal's office and saying, hey, you need to do something about this.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, what were your experiences like? You didn't ever feel left, like you didn't stand out, right, Stacey?
I was there from the very beginning. So for me, it was like everybody knew was somebody new. And I'm as old school as you get. My mom grew up in Beverly Hills. So
right.
And I came in 7th grade. So it was definitely different. And my high school experience was kind of fun.
No, I know, Stacy, you were really popular. I never felt popular. I just wanted to fit in, but I wanted to fit in where I wanted to fit in. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to fit into somebody else. I wanted to be like, do I like you guys? Do I want to be with you guys? Like, to me, that was really important. I didn't want everybody to like me because a lot of people didn't like me, you know?
I did. Stacy did.
I loved you.
I got, and that's why I'm on the show, because other Persians didn't get on the show. I did.
You're our only Persian.
Well, that's the other thing I wanted to say is like, absolutely, this is just the beginning of this conversation that we want to have on the show, because it's changed over the years and everybody's perspective is so different if you came from Iran at a different time or you're a second generation. And still Beverly High is a lot of Persian people, and we want that story too. So if you're listening and you're one of those people, please contact us.
Yeah, I mean, definitely they have a different perspective, but I do, I think that my generation of Persians were very proud. I mean, not to say that nobody else isn't, but I mean, I really love and embrace my culture and my heritage and everything that it stands for. I would always stand up to anybody that would put my people down. Like, there's no way that I would stand for it for 1 second. That's the hard part, like with people, and especially like at Beverly, because there was a lot of arrogance there too. Let's not forget.
Tons.
I mean, there was.
Yeah.
But I think Beverly Hills High probably had
over the top
a bit.
It was out of control. I mean, BMWs,
some of these
Ferraris, clothing.
And these kids were untouchable, right? Like, they were untouchable. So there was a lot of powerful people who were able to sort of, if these kids got into trouble, it's like, hey, mom and dad, like,
we can take care of it.
Fix it. Yeah, fix this. And as a minority, and we didn't have that luxury. Right. So I think that's really important to know that. And I think that's why the Persians stuck together. And maybe a lot of the other immigrants too, like Armenians are that way too. They stick together. We all have to sort of like take care of each other first.
Yes. I love it. This has just been an incredible story. And I love your openness and how you're freely able to talk to us and share your feelings. And it really enlightened me a lot. And I know it'll enlighten our listeners. And we really deeply appreciate you coming on and having this really important, deep discussion with us. So again, thank you.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. I'm so humbled by this experience. And I want to thank you and David for inviting me here today. This is my first podcast, and I really enjoyed it. I hope that your listeners won't be utterly bored with my story.
I don't think they can be. It's such an interesting story, and you're telling such a big part of the history of Beverly Hills, and
enlightening a lot of us.
I'm fascinated by it, and I keep wanting to learn more and more about it.
Okay, so guys, serious, we're gonna go out for Persian food.
Totally, I'll come in anytime, and let's
You're
make a date.
You're gonna have to come, David.
Oh yeah, no, we'll come in. We'll do it.
Come.
Can we do a post podcast Persian food edition?
Yes, yes, we can.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Khodafis.
I like that. Thank you.
Yes.
It was great having you on, and we'll see you again. And thanks for being on Growing Up Beverly Hills.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your support. Please join the conversation by following us on Facebook and Instagram.
If you or somebody you know would make a good guest, let us know. We're looking to tell every type of story. If you haven't done it already, be sure to give us 5 stars and write us a review.
So suicide has personally affected my life, and we like to mention at the end of our show that there is help for everybody out there.
I think everybody's going through a tough time now, and we don't want anybody to take their lives.
Especially during this COVID situation, we've all been experiencing depression and hard times.
Things can always get better. Everything bad now can get better.
Everything can get better, and there is a lot of help out there. So please reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. There is always help.
It doesn't hurt to call, so do that.
You don't have to do this alone. There's always help